everybody, my name is Pixie People, back with another part of What If Deku was Jason Voorhees. And, yeah, you saw the profile. He gets his hockey mask in this one. Alright, we leave off where Deku, well, slaughtered a whole bunch of teenagers, killed a couple cops, and resurrected from having basically being speared a whole bunch of times by a lot of, bullhorns. But we can tell that he regenerated from it, if you're wondering. Yeah, he regenerated. Yeah, it turns out Deku actually has a quirk, and it's called regeneration. And since Deku's never been, they didn't want to physically abuse a child or cut him or almost make him die, they can't really tell if he had a quirk or not. And that toe thing? Absolute lie. That hospital kind of sucked because they just assumed that. Plus, that article came out like as soon as quirks started coming out. It's cap. Not really, if you're wondering. It's probably not cap in the actual series. It might be cap though. We don't know. I don't know. But Deku got a quirk. It's called hyper regeneration. It's basically anytime he gets hurt, almost dies, he's alive. Yeah, anyways. Deku starts walking with his clothes being battered and thinged. His clothes being, his leather mask being also ripped apart. Mostly because of the girl's horns cutting up his face. So he just rips it off with his, basically just looking like a normal dude. With actually, he got a buzz cut. Because Deku buzzed his hair. Yeah, he cut his hair as a child. And just kept it like that. And just kept walking. Eventually, he finds a house, walks in. It's crazy as Deku can hear them cheering at something, but Deku doesn't care. He's just gonna slaughter them anyways. I think his chainsaw broke. And that his machete broke, so I'm just gonna say he doesn't have a machete. So he just takes the next best thing. He's about to reach for his kitchen knife and grabs an ice pick. Because he doesn't like using knives. So he just walks behind the two adults, stabs the woman in the head, then grabs the man, muffling his mouth, and then snapping his neck all the way around. And then he just leaves him there watching the TV. But he takes the ice pick out of the woman's head. Then he also finds the daughter coming down the stair with popcorn and having a hockey mask on, wondering why they got so quiet. The reason she was wearing the hockey mask is because she was watching it in her own room and just wanted to chill on the hockey game. But you know, her parents were being pretty loud, and she got a bit worried that they were being so quiet, so she came down. Jason shows up. Deku shows up, slits her throat with the ice pick by stabbing her in the throat and tearing it out. Then taking the hockey mask off her face after she falls over, puts it on, and then leaves. But actually, he leaves the ice pick too. Then he sees that they have a fire axe and picks that up too. I just remembered that he was carrying the fire axe with him. I just remembered that, but let's just say he dropped it after he got tired. He just dropped it. That's afterwards. So Deku just leaves and takes their car and drives. Even though he has no experience for the car, he drives perfectly. And then he gets to a city, gets out of the vehicle, and then just walks the street, holding in his bloodless as hard as possible. Like, it's just him pushing it back, like, mentally. Like, we see a Deku pushing it back, and it's just a red mist. No one's batting an eye at Deku, just assuming he's a hero. Because, this bureau's bustling with heroes. So eventually he gets into an alley. He still has his axe, by the way. Not, like, he has the axe from the home. Then he finds a girl about to be assaulted, so he just cuts his head off. Then the girl thinks he saved her, but actually Deku just grabs her throat and snaps it, and then throws her against a dumpster, which makes a loud bang. And then a hero heard that, so he walks in there. Also, this hero is themed around water, so of course he has a ice quirk. So Deku hides into the shadows like a freaking phantom. Like, it's crazy how good Deku just slid back into that shadow, disappearing. Then the guy looks around, finding the dead body, is about to vomit, but holds it in. And Deku takes that chance, but to stab him right in the chest, lift him in the air, and then drop him. Then the axe going straight through him. And then Deku picks it back up, takes the axe out, and then grabs the guy's face. He's still alive. And then shoves his face pushes his face towards the axe. Then after the guy tries struggling, Deku crushes his head with his foot, not breaking his skull, but not killing him somehow. And then he kicks his head against the axe, which cuts his head right in half. So Deku just picks up his axe again, and then keeps moving. He had to put some bloodless out so he could get some kills. So he could obviously he had to wipe off his blade. So he grabbed ripped off uh, the hero costume suit and wiped his rag with it. He wiped off his axe. Then he left. Then after his friend finds that his friend died, he was in. He actually had an ice quirk. He actually had a water quirk, and he was themed around ice. The reason they were both buddy is because they're a duo. That the water guy makes a lot of water, and then the ice guy makes that water into ice. Because the guy's quirk is to make water into ice, not that he can just spawn it. I don't know why I needed to explain some random heroes, but I just wanted to. So Deku just keeps walking, but then he hears a news report on him on a mass murder, on a murder on the loose. So to be careful and lock your doors. Deku doesn't care, by the way. He just keeps walking. He doesn't know where he's going, he's just walking. That's until he finds a home that has its back door open. So he just climbs over the fence, thumping across the grass. Then he finds a dog that's barking at him. So he wraps the chain around the dog's neck and makes the dog snap its neck. And then throws it over the fence to the other family. That hits the ground behind the fence. Yeah, I made Deku kill a dog. It's pretty sad though. But dog is way too nuts twice. Deku walks in, finds the girl making dinner, and her boyfriend presumably watching TV. He is watching Freddy vs. Jason. No, just Freddy. Deku feels a bit of a twitch when he watches it, but he ignores it. Goes to the kitchen, grabbing a grabbing an avocado cutter. It's like a plastic toy the girl bought off a thrift store. It's all plastic, but the middle is spiky. So then he just whacks her over the head with it and she just dies. Then Deku picks up the knife to be more stealthy. Then he throws the knife in the back of the guy's head. Then he finds a roommate who just came out of his dorm room. So Deku just takes out his axe and chucks it, while the guy runs away, gets stabbed in the back, and screams for help. from his, roommates, but, they're both dead, so he gets picked up, and then Deku just throws his head against the wall and squishes it. Actually makes it explode. Then Deku just leaves his axe this time, deciding to go more brawly. That is until he finds a freaking trident on the wall. He doesn't know why they have a trident, but they have a trident, so he's just gonna take it. So then he just breaks down the door, puts the trident on his back, and just keeps moving. Again, we don't know where Deku is going, but he's going somewhere. That is until he finds himself at a store, a Halloween store. No one knows why it's open in August, but he'll just ignore it. So he opens the door. He just breaks the lock with his trident. And then he finds a whole lot of props. He's really confused by it. And then he tries picking up a machete, whacking it over the guy's head. The guy being confused and then scared after he realizes it's the guy, not his coworker. But he gets swiftly stabbed through the throat, lifted up, and slammed against the rack. And then Deku just starts walking, finds the coworker who was supposed to be the guy whacking over the head, and uses his trident to use the dull end to stab through the guy's throat, pinning the trident and him to the ground. And the guy dies. That was through his eye, by the way. And Deku just leaves the spear again. He just keeps leaving items for crime scenes. But he keeps walking. That is until he opens the back room to find the boss sitting there cutting papers with a giant I don't know. You put paper next to it and it's like a machete, but it cuts paper. I don't know. I don't remember. But Deku picks him up, slams him against it, picks him up, slams his head against it, then putting his whole body there, shoves him forward and cuts his whole neck with it, cutting his head off. The guy didn't even have time to react. And then Deku snaps it off its hinges, and then he gets a new machete. A bit smaller than the one he used to use, but he'll take it. And he keeps walking, average one on time, like 5 minutes or something. Doing great. So Deku just keeps walking and walking. That is until he finds a different home. It actually is an apartment. He doesn't know why there's an apartment randomly being there. So he walks into the apartment. Yes, it's 1A's apartment. And Dick's really confused why it's just a massive apartment here. So first person he finds is Tokoyami. He just cuts the guy's head off, wondering why the guy had a bird head, but he didn't care. Yeah, Tokoyami dies by a head slice. The guy didn't know what was going on. Then he finds, let's say, Jiro, just sitting there with a spoonful of cereal in her mouth. So Deku just throws his machete at her head, stabbing her straight through the head. And then Deku just takes his axe out and decides to just chill for a bit. So he just grabs Zero's body and puts it into a cabinet. No, like he squishes her freaking body into a cabinet and takes Tokoyami's body and puts it in another cabinet, but this one's bigger, so it actually fits him. Then he takes Tokoyami's head and puts it with Jiro. Then he sits down. Then he holds the bowl Jiro is eating cereal out of. Let's say it's Cheerios. Then the next person that comes in, he'll throw this bowl at him. And sadly for Aoyama, yep, the UA trader himself, he's about to go. he actually went into the kitchen to call all for one, but Deku throws a freaking bowl at his head, breaking his entire skull in, with, and then he smacks his head against the cabinet, which kills him. So Deku just takes his body, instead of just leaving his body just like that, he tears it in half, like down the stomach, and throws him against both walls. Then someone hears that. We see a person's eyes opening and walking to the kitchen again. But Deku's actually out of the kitchen now. He's actually walked behind the kitchen. There's two doors, there's two entrances to the kitchen, and this person's going through the first one. Basically the one Aoyama went through. But Deku's behind him. Yeah, it's him. It's Sato. You know that guy that eats sugar and gets buff? It's him. But this guy is actually roided up. So when Deku goes to stab him, he turns around and punches Deku in the face, actually breaking like the top of his mask. But Deku takes this, grabs the guy's arm, and breaks it with one arm, which makes Sato scream like bloody murder, which makes all of Class 1A wake up and run out in the hall, with Sato about to get his head cut off. Of course, with Deku raising his machete up, but Shoto saves him by burning the crap out of Deku, like that, just burning him to an entire freaking skeletal destruction. And then Deku falls over with his machete fused to his arm now, because it's all metal and it fused to his hand. So Deku just lays there dead, or so everyone thought. Then they just bring Sato to the hospital, and they're all there with him, and then they have to deal with the fact that Aoyama, Tokoyami, and Jiro had died. Well, Sato's still alive, but basically having a missing arm now. Now he has a missing arm. Deku broke it so much that it only had a couple tendons holding it together. So basically, they had to take it off and do like some skin reattachment. So Shato didn't have a dysmorphous hand attached to him that would just flop around. So later that day, the pro heroes come to collect Deku. Okay, for this version, it's a couple of different heroes. Let's say it's not Aizawa and All Might. Let's say let's say Backwash. I think you remember who that guy was. He was the one that was with Ida in the internships. Let's say this is after the Stain arc. And then, and there's also, let's say there's also, I'm thinking. Let me think. Like, let's just say a random hero that has a quirk that makes him look like a tiger. It's a girl, I guess. Doesn't matter. Then they come to pick up Deku with. They thought it was just a corpse, but actually it has a full set of skin. Yeah, he healed like that fast. The Tiger Girl is a bit confused why they said it was a maimed corpse, even though the guy's perfectly fine. Then Deku gets up and shanks her in the throat. Then grabs Backwash and slams his head against the freaking wall, breaking the wall completely. Then just bashing his entire head against him, blowing his head up, chipping his mask as well. And as the girl slowly falls to the ground with Deku's knife hand in her, she grabs up onto his hand, tries to squeeze his hand. It does cut him, but he just doesn't care. Then lifts his hand up and cutting her entire face in half. Because the knife went straight through her throat. So Deku just decides he doesn't want this hand anymore. Then he also sees Backwash's hand almost being the same size as his hand. So he cuts his hand off, takes Backwash's hand, puts some blood of Backwash's onto his, then he just puts Backwash's hand onto his. But this time it has black, for some reason it has black nail polish, so you can tell which one's which. Sudeku then he just picks up his dissevered hand, and then uses it as his new machete. Then Deku, instead of leaving the dorm like he should have, he walks to Bakugo's room, destroys the door like he did, just demolishes it. Like he actually breaks open the door, takes the doorknob off, and then just actually tears the door off the hinges and just start beating in the door. Then he comes in and just starts cutting up the place. Everything Baku owns, broken, bashed, sliced. Actually having bite marks into it because Deku bit a lot of stuff. He actually took his mask off, placed it outside the door, and then walked in. And then he destroys his bed, breaking it, slamming it against everything, breaking every single window he owns. Grabbing his action figures, breaking them, his posters slashed. Then he exits and leaves, with Baku's thing looking like paper, rocks, and basically nothing like it used to look. But Deku then leaves the scene to go to the hospital. Climbing through the window where Sato's being held, everyone had left for the day, thinking that, the guy was dead. But he's still alive with Sato being awake but paralyzed for a bit because he just got off surgery. And then Sato freaking mentally, physically makes himself move, grabbing a pudding cup, putting some pudding in his mouth, and that just nullifies the anesthesia for a bit. So he buffs up and goes to punch Deku a second time, but Deku catches his hand, not breaking it this time, but just then punching Sato in the face like he did to him, breaking Sato's entire face, actually making his lips bleed a lot, and his nose bleed out a lot, his eye basically being out of its socket. And Sato can't scream because his throat just hurts like immensely. If he screams, his throat will probably kill himself. He'll probably kill himself if he screams. So Sato picks up his hospital bed, throws it to Deku, but Deku grabs the hospital bed and throws it back at him, which Sato punches away. But Deku dodges it, then throws the machete into Sato's stomach, which Sato coughs out blood. But Deku tries to then humors Sato and puts two fingers up and pulls puts them like in a maneuver where it says, "Bring it." So Sato actually grabs the fridge, grabs every pudding cup in there, and eats all of them. Then he just gets absolutely roided. Like he's massive now. So he also freaking his stub becomes like a freaking rock. So then he just starts pounding Deku in. Of course, Deku getting holes through him and freaking his arm being punched off. Not his new arm, but his old arm. And then his throat punched in, his mask completely shattered. But after Sato's sugar rush comes down, he gets paralyzed again. Deku regenerates all of his damage that he's done to him, except for the hand part. Then he puts his foot on Sato's face and crushes it making his head pop. And then Deku then grabs the hand that was punched off and then exits the building. Then later the next day, they find Sato in his room with all the furniture being thrown around and all the pudding cups being eaten and Sato having his head crushed and his stomach bleeding. So they know that the guy survived. Also, they were told he survived by the fact that Backwash and Tiger Girl were killed. Actually, let's call her Tigress. It's not any relation, but just call her that. And that's it. Well, that's really things for now. No, I'm kidding. But like, subscribe, hit the post notification bell if you want to be notified for all the parts that come out and anything I post that is new. See y'all. Bye. Be good people. that is stolen from someone, but I can't remember who. Peace.